I got one of the most popular objections that we get, and I wanted to share it with you because after I got the objection no less than 2 or 3 times, I ended up walking out with a signed purchase agreement. Welcome to the Ryan Rice Show, where we talk about what we learned yesterday that we can apply today so that we can be better tomorrow. I hope you enjoy and subscribe. I went on a seller appointment a couple days ago, and I got one of the most popular objections that we get, and I wanted to share it with you because after I got the objection no less than 2 or 3 times, I ended up walking out with a signed purchase agreement. So for those of you with direct seller real estate businesses, you all know that we get 3 main objections. We get the objection, I need to think about it. We get the objection, I need to run this by my insert whoever important person is, whether it's spouse, mother, daughter, attorney, etc. And the last seller objection we get is no, the price is too low. And this objection that I overcame was the last one, which is the price is too low. And this can be a hard one to overcome. So I was able to overcome it, and I wanted to share with you how I did. And I think you guys might get some value out of it if you're running some direct-to-seller real estate businesses. So this appointment was an in-person appointment, and that actually worked out really well because the objection that I overcame involved a prop, and the prop was the actual purchase agreement. So I had 2 copies of the purchase agreement with me. I ended up using the purchase agreement physically, and here's what happened, and here's how I overcame the objection. So I went through the appointment, and I offered, and he said, no, the price is way too low. We're way off. And for some context, this seller is 87 years old, keeps things very close to his chest. It was clear, based on the information that he shared, that trust was an issue for him. He told our sales guy verbally on the phone when he originally called in that he doesn't like answering a lot of questions, and he actually hung up on us when he first called because my sales guy did a really nice job trying to ask questions to understand what he was looking to accomplish. And we rubbed him the wrong way, and so he hung up on us. We stayed persistent, and we ended up calling him and getting the appointment. But it was clear that he wasn't somebody that was just going to willfully share information, and was definitely an old school type of mentality. And so I offered, and he said, oh, we're way off. And he actually told me that he had another offer that was significantly higher, I think were the words that he used. And because he kept things very close to his chest, one of the prominent things that I try to do earlier in the appointment is to get some sort of information on what he wants to sell the house for. And after trying about 10 times, and I would say usually about 9 out of 10 appointments, we can get this information from the sellers. But I could not get the information of what he wanted for the home. So I was flying blind here in the offer, and I wasn't quite sure where he was expecting to come in or what he wanted for the house. And so after I offered the first time, and he said no, that they're way off, I finally got a number out of him. And I was able to go back and I revised my offer. And I came back, and the offer that I gave him the second time wasn't what he wanted. It was still lower than what it is that he wanted. And so he said no again. And so what I did at that point is, and I was at a point where I couldn't go much higher with my offer based on the underwriting of the deal. And so I just started to ask him, how are you going to decide which offer is best? And of course he replied, well, whichever one is the highest. And that's an answer that I get 9 out of 10 times, right? Sellers, they look at the offer number, and that's typically how they're making the decision in their opinion on which offer is best. So I asked him, well, what about the terms? And he got kind of this confused look on his face. And I said, well, things like the inspection period, the earnest money deposit, maybe assignment language. And the confused face got even more confused. And he really didn't know what I was talking about. And so I asked him, I said, hey, do you mind if I show you the purchase agreement? I said, I don't, it doesn't bother me whether you sell the house to me or not. But what's most important is in this business, you can get any offer that you want. You need to get to the closing table. And so what is most important is that you go through this process where you accept an offer, but you actually get to the closing table and you get the money in your pocket. And there are some things that are in the purchase agreement that are going to increase the likelihood that you are going to get to the closing table. Do you mind if I show those to you? And he said, well, yeah, let's take a look. And so what that did is it put me on same side selling for him, right? When I say same side selling, we're on the same team. I'm trying to serve him, and every client that I offer, we're trying to serve them in the best way possible. And we have to show the sellers that we are on their team and we want their best interest in mind. And in order to accomplish our goals, we need to be able to accomplish what the seller is looking for. And to show the seller that that's what we truly want, we have to show that we're on the same team as them. So I pulled in close and I got the purchase agreement out and I started at the top and I showed him the agreement and I said, well, first, one of the first things you want to look out for is this section right here where it talks about the earnest money deposit. And I said, this is how you know if somebody is serious about buying your home. If someone has a purchase agreement with you, but they don't offer an earnest money deposit, that could be an indication that they're a little less serious about purchasing the home, because what that means is if they don't perform their side of the contract, then they could back out of the contract and there's no skin in the game, right? The higher the earnest money deposit, the higher the skin in the game for you, which means if for some reason they don't perform on their side of the agreement, then that skin in the game goes to you. And so how someone shows you how serious they are is by how high the earnest money deposit is. And I don't write every purchase agreement with a high earnest money deposit, but because I have the confidence that I know I'm going to close, I am not worried about not closing the deal, then I'm fine putting a higher earnest money deposit. And I think that's something that if you are direct to seller and you close a bunch of deals, then that's something that you can leverage because you have confidence in your operation, you have confidence in your underwriting, use it to your advantage and put down a higher earnest money deposit if that'll get you the deal. Real quick, as you guys know, I just recently started this podcast. If you could give it a rating with a quick tap of the thumb, that would mean the world to me. And even more importantly, it could help spread the word to a broader audience, which in turn could help change a life. Thank you so much, and let's get back to the show. And he responded and just said, wow, that I didn't realize that. And then he shared with me that he had another piece of land that was in contract with someone else. And he said, I just signed this other purchase agreement for this other piece of land. I don't think there's any deposit there. And so he was going to go back and look at that agreement. So that was the first thing I showed him and educating him on was the earnest money deposit. The second thing, I went to the inspection period paragraph and I said something to look out for in this inspection period. What's very common in this industry is that people will put out really long, drawn-out inspection periods. And basically what that means is that at any point during the course of the time that you have the agreement with them, if it falls within that inspection period, they can back out and there's no recourse. They can back out for whatever reason they want. And they'll just use the inspection clause, and that means that they're free and clear. And so if you look for the shorter the purchase agreement, the shorter the inspection period on the purchase agreement, then you have a little bit of clarity on how much time needs to pass before this earnest money deposit section goes hard. And if someone backs out after this inspection period, then there's a possibility you can keep that earnest money deposit. And I could tell he was just, at that point, so appreciative that I'm educating him on what to look out for. And uh, I could just tell that it meant a lot to him. And so then I went to the next section and I said, here is a section in the purchase agreement where there is some assignment language. And yes, in my purchase agreements, I have assignment language, but I showed it to him and I said, here is also something to look for. Assignment, what that means is that I can have a purchase agreement with you. And then if I want to bring in a partner or if I want to sell it to another one of my investors, I have the ability to do that. And I said, what's very common in this industry is a lot of people do that, but they're not honest with you because everyone has their different reasons, but some of them don't know what they're doing. And so they'll put this language in here because they'll put it under contract with you for a certain price and they'll try to sell it for a higher price. And because they don't know what they're doing, they write the purchase agreement that gives them the ability to back out at any time. And if they don't find someone that'll pay more for the property, then they don't end up closing. And that's something that's important. And I said, look, I have the assignment language in my purchase agreement, but what's different about working with me is I'm not going to lie to you about it. I'm going to be honest with you. And I do that all the time is I'll bring in some partners and we'll work together on a property. But that's something also that you want to look out in a purchase agreement. And at this point, he's 87, right? And he's actually sitting in one of those rockers with wheels. And so he kind of sits back in his little rocker and just pauses for a second. And I could tell that the wheels were turning, and it was more, he was digesting more than the information that I just shared with him, right? I could tell he had kind of transitioned his mind to maybe rethinking about working with me. And he paused for literally what felt like 2 straight minutes. And I think this was important. I was just silent the whole time. So I just sat there. And it was awkward. And like the longer the silence was, the more awkward it became. But I wanted him to sit in his silence and progress through whatever thoughts he was going. And so he sat back in his rocker and he was just silent for a while. And he brought his hand up and he starts touching his face. And then he finally broke the silence and said, I'm so happy that you shared that stuff with me. That's something that I am going to go look out for in this current contract that I have. And he said, I tell you what, if you can come up to X price, which was just above where I had just offered him, then he was like, I'll do it. And I said, okay, let me run that by my team. I went and ran some numbers. The numbers worked. And so I came back and I said, look, another type of closing tactic that I'll touch on real quick. I didn't say, hey, let's do it. I said, hey, look, I talked with my team. They told me as long as I walk out of here with a purchase agreement today, then they'll do that price. But I got to walk out of here with a purchase agreement today. If I don't, they're going to give me a really hard time that we came up to that price. And he said, okay, let's do it. And I drew up the paperwork and we went through the whole purchase agreement. I filled it all in and I got his signature on it. So I thought that was valuable enough to share with you guys because it's probably one of the most popular objections that we get. And I think the lesson here for me is use transparency to your benefit. And I think when people say that the price is too low, make sure that the sellers are educated on what happens in our industry. If you're in person and you have the purchase agreement, go through the important pieces for them. Put yourself in their shoes and talk to them about parts of the agreement that you would want to be in your favor in their shoes. And then when you get it in contract, write the purchase agreement in their favor. Like, I think there's nothing wrong with that. And as long as you have your sales processes dialed in and you're confident that you're going to be able to do the deal, then you can still write the agreement so that you're protected in some cases. So I still wrote in a 14-day inspection period for this agreement so I could have my team go in there and just validate everything that I personally saw. But he was okay with everything that we put in the agreement because I think he saw that I was looking out in his best interest and I showed him specifically what to look for in the agreement. And I didn't cross out assignment language or anything like that. I kept it all in there, and he was comfortable with it because I educated him on the things that were important to him. So I thought that was pretty cool. Hope you guys got some value out of that. Definitely a good little nugget on how to overcome one of the most popular objections that we get. And thank you so much for listening, and I'll see you guys on the next one. Peace.